She thought he slept, but his heart raced at her touch. The bedroom was bathed in the soft, silver light of the full moon streaming through the gauze curtains. Sarah Mitchell sat on the edge of their king-sized bed, her fingers nervously smoothing the wrinkles from her cotton nightgown. The house was perfectly quiet, except for the gentle hum of the ceiling fan above and what she believed was the steady, peaceful breathing of her husband beside her. Michael lay on his side, his broad shoulders rising and falling in what appeared to be the rhythm of deep sleep. His dark hair was tousled against the white pillowcase, and his face looked younger somehow in the moonlight, free from the worry lines that had appeared over the past few months. Sarah studied his profile, remembering the man she had fallen in love with 15 years ago, before life had gotten so complicated. But what Sarah didn't know was that Michael was wide awake. His eyes were closed, his breathing deliberately controlled, but his mind was racing. Every nerve in his body was alert to her presence just inches away. He had been pretending to sleep for the past 20 minutes, ever since she had quietly slipped out of bed and then returned. He didn't want to disturb whatever she was thinking about so intently. The distance between them lately had been growing, and he was afraid that any sudden movement might send her away again. Sarah had been carrying a weight in her heart for weeks now. Their marriage had hit a rough patch, nothing dramatic or explosive, just a slow drift that happens when two people get caught up in the demands of everyday life. Michael had been working longer hours at his architecture firm, coming home exhausted and distracted. She had been managing her own stress as a high school counselor, dealing with budget cuts and difficult cases that followed her home in her thoughts. They had been like two ships passing in the night, sharing the same bed but living in separate worlds. The easy conversations had been replaced by practical exchanges about schedules and bills. The gentle touches had become rare, and when they did happen, they felt awkward and forced. Tonight was different, though. Tonight, something had shifted. In Sarah's heart, she had been lying awake, listening to what she thought was Michael's peaceful sleep, when a memory had surfaced. It was from their early dating days, when Michael had gotten food poisoning after trying to impress her by cooking an elaborate dinner. She had spent the entire night taking care of him, bringing him water, holding a cool cloth to his forehead, and simply being present. Even in his misery, he had kept apologizing for ruining their evening. "You didn't ruin anything," she had whispered then, stroking his hair gently. "This is what love looks like, being here when things aren't perfect." Now, 15 years later, she realized they had both forgotten that simple truth. Love wasn't just about the good times and romantic gestures. It was about choosing each other, especially when things got difficult. Sarah's hand hovered over Michael's shoulder. She wanted to touch him, to bridge the gap that had grown between them, but she was afraid. What if he pulled away? What if the distance had become too great? But then she remembered something else. Marriage wasn't about waiting for the perfect moment or feeling completely confident. Sometimes it was about taking a leap of faith, about being vulnerable even when you weren't sure of the outcome. Slowly, carefully, Sarah placed her hand on Michael's shoulder. His skin was warm beneath her palm, and she could feel the solid strength of him that had always made her feel safe. She began to move her hand in gentle circles, the way she used to when they were newlyweds, and touch came as naturally as breathing. What Sarah couldn't see was the effect her touch was having on Michael. His heart, which had been beating steadily in his chest, suddenly began to race, not from surprise or alarm, but from something deeper and more profound. Her touch was like coming home after a long journey. It was familiar yet electric, comforting, yet awakening something that had been dormant for too long. Michael had to concentrate on keeping his breathing steady. Every instinct told him to turn toward her, to pull her into his arms and tell her how much he had missed this simple intimacy. But he was afraid to. Afraid that if he moved too quickly, the spell would be broken. Afraid that she might realize he had been awake and withdraw her hand. So he lay there, his heart pounding so hard he was certain she could hear it. While her gentle touch continued its healing work, Sarah felt something shift in the atmosphere of the room. Though Michael appeared to still be sleeping, there was a change in the energy between them. His breathing seemed different somehow, and she could swear she felt his heartbeat quickening beneath her hand. But that was impossible if he was truly asleep, wasn't it? She leaned closer, studying his face in the moonlight. His features looked peaceful, but there was something about the set of his jaw, the way his eyelids seemed to flutter slightly, that made her wonder. "Michael," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the quiet room. For a moment there was no response. Then, slowly, his eyes opened and met hers. In the silvery light she could see they were bright with unshed tears. "How long have you been awake?" she asked softly, her hand still resting on his shoulder. "Since you came back to bed," he admitted, his voice husky with emotion. I didn't want to scare you away. Sarah felt her own eyes filling with tears. I wouldn't have gone anywhere. We've both been going somewhere, though, Michael said, turning onto his back so he could look at her properly. We've been drifting away from each other, and I didn't know how to get back. Sarah nodded, understanding completely. I've been feeling it too. The distance. I was lying here thinking about how we used to be, and I realized I've been waiting for things to get better instead of trying to make them better. Michael reached up and covered her hand with his, pressing it more firmly against his chest. Can you feel that? He asked. Sarah nodded. His heart was beating rapidly, strong and alive beneath her palm. That's what happens every time you touch me, he said quietly. Even after all these years. Especially after all these years. I love you, Sarah. I love the life we've built together, and I love the woman you've become. I'm sorry I've been so distant lately. We both have been, Sarah said, moving her hand to cup his face. But we're here now. We're both here. Michael sat up slowly, and Sarah shifted closer to him. They were facing each other now in the moonlit room, their knees touching, their hands intertwined. I have an idea, Sarah said, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. What if we start over? Not with our whole relationship, but with how we treat each other day to day. What if we made a promise to touch each other every day, even if it's just for a moment? A hand on a shoulder, a brief hug, holding hands while we watch TV. Michael nodded eagerly. And what if we talked to each other the way we did when we were dating? Really listened, asked questions about each other's days, shared what we're thinking about. And what if we went to bed at the same time again? Sarah added. Even if we're both tired, even if we just lie here quietly together. I'd like that, Michael said, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing her knuckles gently. I'd like all of that. They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, simply enjoying the feeling of being close again. The moonlight continued to stream through the windows, and the ceiling fan hummed its gentle song above them. Finally, Sarah yawned and smiled sleepily. I think I'm ready to actually sleep now. They settled back into bed, but this time they were close together. Sarah curled against Michael's side, her head on his chest, where she could hear his heartbeat returning to its normal, steady rhythm. Michael's arm wrapped around her, holding her close but not too tight. Sweet dreams, Sarah, he whispered into her hair. Sweet dreams, Michael, she replied, already drifting towards sleep. As they lay there together, both of them knew that they had turned a corner. The problems in their lives hadn't magically disappeared, and there would still be busy days and stressful times ahead. But they had remembered something important, that love was a choice they made every day. And that sometimes the smallest gestures, a gentle touch, a moment of vulnerability, the decision to reach out instead of pulling away could bridge any distance between two hearts. In the morning, they would wake up together, and the healing would continue. But for now, they slept peacefully, side by side, their hearts beating in quiet harmony under the watchful light of the moon.